and welcome to Manx Radio. I'm our election producer, Amy Griffiths, and this is our general election candidate interview series. In the run-up to Thursday the 24th of September, we're giving everyone who's declared their intention to stand in the election the chance to take part in a 30-minute interview with us. We'll be asking them why they should be trusted with your vote. Today I'm speaking to Abby Quirk, and this is her first time standing in a general election. She's an independent candidate standing in Arbory, Castletown and Malew, and she joins me now. So Abby, welcome first of all, and just tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you for anyone who's not come across you yet?
So I am a mum of 4 beautiful children and I'm a small business owner in Ballasalla. I own the Quirky Teapot Cafe.
And why is it that you want to put yourself forward to be an MHK?
I'm standing because I have spent years dealing with the system, and not always has the system worked for the people it's supposed to serve. I have sat in meetings, asked questions and challenged decisions and kept asking why when the answer did not make sense. I have done this as a mum, as a small business owner and someone navigating the health service, education and the justice system. I want to take that experience into the House of Keys. I have lived this. This isn't something that I've read. This is my life.
And we're going to get into a few of those topics in a bit more detail. But I suppose, first of all, is that you've not really had much experience, if any, as far as I'm aware, with local commissioners and so with government at a local level. So what makes you want to jump straight in at a national level?
Because this has been something that has changed my life, and I've recently had a meeting with CAMS about my own daughter's mental health because there was a massive mess up there. And I put on Facebook, you know, if this is happening to my family, whose else family is being failed by CAMS? And in 24 hours, I had 25 families contact me with failings that CAMS weren't aware of because these families hadn't brought it up with them. So I thought I'll share their experiences while I was there. And that's sort of been the whole, you know what, I tried to change it from the outside. What can I do on the inside?
And so how much do you then understand about the Isle of Man's Parliament and its government and how it actually works? Where do you think you'd fit into that?
Honestly, I still have a lot of learning to do, but I'm ready to learn and I'm prepared to fight for the Isle of Man. I mean, these kids are our future, and at the minute, they're being failed.
And have you ever gone along to a sitting of the House of Keys or Tynwald to get a feel of it and to see what you'd kind of be in for if you were to be elected?
Unfortunately not. I find, to dive in the deep end. Why not?
And I suppose you are a small business owner, as you say, and you work in the constituency. So what has been your experience of operating that business?
So it has been hard. The start was the footfall. I also own Ballasalla stores, but my husband runs that. That's his problem. But on my side, the cafe, it has been hard. And then we hit that threshold recently. And that sounds good. But, you know, looking on paper, £90,000 turnover, great. But when you've got your electricity, your staff costs, you know, your heating costs, everything, there's no money. And because the VAT threshold hasn't been raised, along with all these other rises, we are hitting it quicker and quicker and quicker. So instead of having, say, 2 years to hit that VAT, I hit it in a year. And now I have to pay 20%, you know, to the VAT man, as we call him. So that's going to be a real struggle when I get my first VAT bill through, because we buy things in that don't have VAT on it. But as soon as you heat it up or you sit in, I have to add 20%.
And for those who don't know, what exactly is the VAT threshold and why does that have such a big impact on your business?
So the VAT threshold is £90,000 and it has a massive impact on the hospitality side because everything comes in non-VAT, so you don't pay VAT on it. And then when you sell it, you have to add that 20% on, and then that goes to the government. And that's where I've really struggled, and I have asked the questions as to why it hasn't been raised, and all I get back is we follow the UK rules.
And I suppose that is the difficulty with it, isn't it? Because it's an agreement that is made with the UK. So it has to be that's to a certain extent what they're willing to accept as well. So can you see why there's sometimes maybe a sticking point there where it's because this is something that comes up repeatedly about the VAT threshold, and that is the response. But can you see why it's challenging?
I can see why it's challenging. But why aren't we going to the UK government and seeing their response as to why they haven't upped it?
And is that something that you would look to do if you were elected?
Yeah, absolutely, because it doesn't just affect my business, it affects all businesses around the island.
And how would you make the UK government listen to the concerns of businesses here on the Isle of Man?
There's no way to make them listen, but you can ask the question and keep asking, even if it's just to get a response as to why they haven't moved it up.
And do you think there's been enough support from government towards small businesses?
No. So I went on a course at the college after I opened my business. And because I have Ballasalla stores as well, as I knew a lot of it. So then I'm stumped. Like, who else do you turn to? There is nobody. I could get a mentor. But I had to log in into a system that didn't recognise me, and it wouldn't let me change passwords or anything. So I was stumped there. So it's just learning and talking to people.
And I suppose that's just support as well. But what about financial support and things like that? Do you think government's doing enough to try and really encourage the economy to grow and to make the economy somewhere that small businesses can thrive?
No, there's so much red tape that we have. I think my most recent one is every year I have to renew my beneficiary ownership, and to do that they needed my ID. But they didn't want my physical ID. They wanted me to join an online thing and then get it checked that way. I've just had the email saying that system's now shut down. So who do I send my ID to? What platform do I have to put it on?
And it's just little things like that.
Little things like that can make a massive difference, because then you get threatened that you haven't done it. So that's one that people don't see. Yeah.
And I guess when you're busy operating a business as well, you don't have the time necessarily to try and chase up these things and try and find the right avenues to go down.
Because it's not just a 9-to-5 job, having your own business, which is great because the kids come and help me. It's constant. It is a constant paperwork, chasing government who only work 9-to-5, those officers.
Yeah. And so what do you think the government could be doing better in that respect then? What would be really helpful for you as a business?
Back to paperwork, keep everything offline. I know it seems it's easier said than done, but if you want my ID, let me just drop my ID off or photocopy it and send it to you. Don't rely on an app that's then going to close down.
Yeah. And so another one of the reasons that you're standing is because you want to see reforms to the island's criminal justice system. And you say this because your family does have lived experience of it from a victim's perspective, which we, for obvious reasons, can't go into the specifics of. But what were some of the issues that you encountered from the victim's perspective during that process?
So during that process, everybody thinks that once the sentence has been handed, that's it, story's over, the end. As victims, it continues, and even nowadays it's still continuing. We've relied less on victim support than previously, but it's around the parole. It's not transparent, asking for victim impact statements, and you only have a couple of days to do it. And it's not enough when you're already traumatised. You're finding those words to get it right across to the parole board, how they're not safe to be released in a couple of days. There's no time for it. This is something that you have to really think about and get your point across, because the parole board don't want emotion, they want the facts. And when you're emotionally involved in it, the facts can be hard to put down on paper. And
do you feel like there's maybe enough compassion shown towards victims?
No, absolutely not. Victim support, again, have been fantastic, but they didn't have the answer to questions. They couldn't get the answer. So I had to chase heads of departments to try and get the answer to these questions. And it was just a flat out, no, can't deal with you. And I was like, well, being a victim in this, I need to know. I need to know how long I've got. I need to know when might get parole.
And what kind of impact does that have on you?
Massive impact. Massive impact, because we don't know where we stand. It's been hard. It's been really hard.
And again, in that situation, what are the main things that you would like to be done differently in that process?
So I think with parole hearings, it needs to be transparent. And I do believe in Scotland, I think the victims can attend the parole hearing. And that is something that we wanted to do, but we weren't told anything. We weren't told when his parole was. It actually came to light by a former inmate who had told us when his parole was.
Oh my goodness, that's, pretty unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I suppose, as you say, in those situations, you're already traumatised. And so trying to make that process just as easy as possible for the victim so that they feel comfortable enough in coming forward. That's something that you'd really want to push for.
Really, really want to push for. And then we've got another side with the criminal compensation. It was awarded 3 years ago. Unfortunately, they won't pass it over and let us put in savings account. They want a trust fund. So at the minute, it's just sat there with no interest being earned on it in the government's pocket. And that's money that, from what we could get to the interest, it'd make a massive difference to the victims.
And so moving on from that then, you mentioned at the start that you and your family have had experience of using CAMS, so the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service on the island. So what has been your experience of that?
So for my first child, who is nearly 18, it was abysmal, absolutely abysmal. But that was before Manx Care took over. With my youngest, who's 7, he's got autism and ADHD. It has been a lot better, I have to admit. There have been improvements. But from what I've gathered, and my daughter doesn't mind me saying this, my daughter was in crisis a few weeks ago, hence the meeting I had with the manager. So she was in crisis. We went to see a doctor that wasn't her doctor, and this doctor tried to put her on medication that had previously tried to kill her. So that was why I had the meeting, and the manager of CAMS told me that, and he did show me the figures, that a budget was promised to CAMS and it wasn't passed over. And the mistake that was made, which thankfully we fought and knew not to put her on that medication, is they need an electronic scriber. So what that does is it puts it all on a system, like the doctors do. Whereas CAMS at the minute, every prescription they get, they have to physically copy it and download it onto a file. Whereas an electronic prescriber would stop all that. It would just be on the system automatically and know that she was on that medication. It nearly killed her. Let's not try it again.
And again, I suppose, what impact does that have on not just yourself, but also your children as well, and their experience of trying to get the help that they need?
So with my daughter and her mental health issues, she hates going to CAMS because it's always a fight. And that's the side. I think CAMS have got the neurodivergent kids sorted in a sense that they've got the support there. But then when we look at the other side of teenagers with mental health problems like bipolar and depression, PTSD, that's a problem we have right there. And I understand, I'm all for medication because that has saved my daughter's life, and getting the therapy that she needs. But she needs to be stable on the medication before we can consider the therapy. But trying to get her to therapy while she's not stable, we can't.
And so what do you think that you could do if you were elected that would try and help improve some of these things that you want to see?
So one would be the budget actually getting delivered to CAMS, just so they can get the things that they need to finalise the improvements that have already been made. And also it's understanding that not all children fit the same hole. A lot of kids are, say, square-shaped, and you're trying to fit them in a circular hole. They're not going to fit. Not all child fits the system. And that's what we need to look into. These kids are our future. They're the future of our island.
And that, I suppose, then extends into education, where I know this administration has tried to take some strides, at least, in trying to make schools a bit more accessible. And what's your been experience of the education system so far then, from the perspective of your children?
So with my eldest, it was a bit hit and miss. And then when he went to Castle Rushen High School, I did have one teacher who did fight his battles. And we got him through, and he's got a job right now. My youngest, thankfully, he's at Ballasalla School, and they've been amazing with him. For the past 6 months, he's been attending Tiny She, which was formerly ESC, which is what we know it as. And that's had a massive impact on him, just being able to cope and understanding, his emotions, which he's really struggled with. Yeah.
And I think, so do you feel like enough is being done within a school environment then to at least start making progress on this? I mean, nothing is ever going to be perfect, is it? But do you feel like something at least is starting to be done in that sense?
Things are starting to be done, but in the likes of Ballasalla, we've got all these new houses. Ballasalla School, when we moved to Ballasalla 6 years ago, my kids made it 100 pupils at that school. I think we're now hitting nearly 200 pupils, and it just keeps growing. The school isn't big enough. So, that's Ballasalla School, Castle Rushen High School. Where's this new school? You've got all these kids coming in, and a lot of them will have additional needs, and there is no space and there's no resources because the school is that old.
And if we're looking at your manifesto, this is part of, or one of your priorities is planning communities properly. And as you say, Ballasalla is one of the key areas of development on the island at the moment. So do you think that's been shown in Ballasalla, and that community's been planned properly for how much it's growing?
No, absolutely not. We lost the bank, the post office. The school is very small. We've got mobiles to house the kids in. It's not, it's not been thought through properly.
And how would you change that from the inside?
I think it's just slowing it down, because I think we've got another development that's due to build for another 300-400 houses. And, before that begins, we need to really look at the school, look at what's in Ballasalla, and how are we going to house all these people. The surgery there is struggling already. So we need to get more things put in place to help, house everyone.
And one of the examples that's often given is that making changes to the planning process, so that when developments like this are given approval, that it's on the condition that things like there is a doctor's surgery built, there is a school built, or provision for a school built. I mean, is that something that you would like to see as part of these developments? Yeah,
so, we're still waiting for that roundabout, the Belthame roundabout, to be built. And the stories I've been told by them from the builders, is insane. Won't go into that. But yeah, it's little things like that. You're going to build these houses, right? So if each of these houses have 2-3 kids, or even one child, and they're going to end up in a school, we need to get a new school built or expanded ASAP so it can be housed.
Yeah. And if we're looking at some of the other issues on your manifesto, so top of the list on your priorities is an honest government. And what is it about the current government that you don't think is honest?
More where the money's going, to be honest. Like everybody's saying, the Liverpool landing strip supposed to cost 17 mil, came up to 70 mil. And it's also each department. But if they're going to get public money, then the public need to know where that money's gone. So you can say key performance indicators, which is what they should be doing, but it shouldn't become a box-ticking exercise. And numbers alone do not tell the whole story, which is we don't know where this money's gone. So where did that money for CAMS go? If they were promised that budget, where did it go and why didn't they receive it? And that's something that I'm interested in, is that everything's cost money, I get that. But when something's not delivered, it impacts the people, the families and the communities, and they must be given appropriate weight, when considered.
So if you were then elected, how would you hold government to account and make sure it was accountable for where these you say kind of discrepancies come from?
So I think monthly departments should show what money they've received, what they've spent and what they've achieved with it. And that's how I feel that's the only way we could know where the money's going.
Yeah. And do you feel like that's not being done at the moment then, presumably?
No.
So how would you specifically make that happen then? So, I mean, obviously you'd just be one MHK of 24, so you'd be having to get a lot of support for something like that. So how would you go about doing that?
Just talk and express my concerns, ask the questions that need to be asked. And that's really, not stupid questions, but questions that matter. And if, say, like with Manx Care, they hit over budget. Okay, well, why did they hit over budget? Let's look into why they've gone over budget. How's it happened? What can we scale back on? But also, where the money's been put in other departments.
And another bit of your manifesto that you've talked about as well is that of renewable energy, which is a huge talking point. So I suppose, where do you stand on renewable energy as a first point of call?
I'm all for renewable energy. It's the way forward. We've got to have security for the island. We can't rely on fossil fuels forever. With the wind farms, I am against it. Right now, I'm against it.
Which one's that? Sorry, there's the Ørsted, okay.
So I believe, because the government, the Isle of Man is not going to, from what I've read, there's no real benefit other than money. We're not going to get cheaper electricity. We're not benefiting from it. So in my opinion, why can't we look at other ways for the Isle of Man to get renewable energy? The tidal things. So I'm not great with this, sorry. Like the public buildings, solar panels on a public building, that'll reduce the electricity, and that can create saves for the government itself, And
they have just approved some on the NSC, haven't they?
Yeah.
So they will be getting their solar panels in the not too distant future.
And at the hospital, tax office, Yeah.
And of course, one of the big wind farm projects is in Carberry, Castletown and Malew, the proposed Kirrie wind farm.
Yeah.
So where do you stand on that?
I haven't read enough into it, if I'm totally honest. But once I know more, I will make that public.
Yeah. So, but you feel like renewable energy is the way forward?
It is the way forward. It has to be.
And I guess it's one of those ones as well where one of the common things is like, we want it, but not on our doorstep.
Yeah.
And so, when we don't, so particularly when it's going to impact views and it's going to impact landscapes, people feel passionately about it. And what's your response to that, I suppose?
I understand that. My biggest thing is the wildlife. How's it going to impact the landscape, the wildlife? Because, animals have homes there. So we just need to be mindful of that and see, is the impact worth it?
Yeah. And do you think that this administration's done enough to progress some of these renewable energy schemes?
I think they've done their best. I do. I think they've done their best with probably what they've been given, but I think more could be done. I think, the solar panels on the NSC, that could have, been approved years ago. Make a start for it then instead of now when it's coming to an end.
And I mean, at the start of this administration, there was it £40 million was put aside for climate change projects. And do you feel like, enough of that's been utilised and that we've seen enough changes made to try and make the island a bit more energy efficient?
£40 million, no. That's a lot of money. And no, I don't think that's been done.
No. But what would you be doing if you were elected to try and make sure that these things were happening?
Pen to paper, talk to the other MHKs, look at planning. And just seeing, £40 million, what will that get? Solar panels for, the hospital, the public buildings. How much is that going to cost? Right, if that's going to cost 1 million, right, so what can we do with the other 39 million? How can we make the island more sustainable energy-wise?
And another priority in your manifesto is what you describe as a balanced approach to immigration. So what do you think of as a balanced approach?
Is that if you can bring something to the Isle of Man, great. You know, you're welcome. But I think we do need to keep the work permits. People come and they work, contribute, and they do become part of our community, and they're very welcomed. We see a lot of South Africans who are lovely, and they bring so much to the Isle of Man, especially, when they bring their communities over. They're great. But I think the other side of it is can our infrastructure cope? Can Manx Care cope with everybody, with the population increasing? And at the minute, it's barely coping with our population. So, where do we go? Right, we really, really are struggling now.
And you run a hospitality business, which is one of the key sectors where migrant workers are generally employed on the island, and also one of the key sectors where we tend to see job shortages and people, looking for people to employ in those roles. And do you think that that's been an impact on your business? Is that something that you've seen there?
No.
So how do you feel about the current campaigns to try and get more people to relocate here and to try and, the government had its plan of increasing the population to 100,000. And how do you think of those schemes?
I think they've not thought much into it. Well, they probably have, but, it's the infrastructure. The hospital is struggling already. The schools, like I've said, are already struggling. The high schools, like where are we going to put all these people? I understand the houses are there, but it's the infrastructure. The GP's 6 weeks to wait for an appointment. If you're desperate, where do you go then? A&E. That puts pressure on Manx Care. Meds, Manx Care.
And do you think then that there should be any changes to the current work permit system, or do you think it works well as it is?
I think now they've put a stricter thing on it. I think it works well. But I think you need to contribute to our community, and if you can contribute to our community, then okay.
But I suppose you could argue that there's lots of different ways that you could contribute to the community, isn't there? It's not necessarily purely on an economic basis.
No.
Would you agree?
Yes, sorry.
So I guess what then... Because we're coming to the end of the interview now, but what would be your key focus, the one thing that if you were elected at the end of the next 5-year term, you really want to make sure that you've achieved if you've been elected?
Mental health, the mental health side of things, because these children grow up, and I have not had a personal experience with the adult mental health system, but when my son turns 18, that's when we'll know. Because he'll be under them. And if they're failed as children and then they go into adult mental health, they've then got to struggle with these kids when they hit 18. So I think the priority is getting our kids the help and support that they need, because one day you might think, oh, it doesn't matter to me. My kids, as we say, normal. But you just don't know what happens, if they're victims to a crime. You'll need CAMS for PTSD. They struggle leaving the house. There's a CAMS problem, and I think really it does impact a lot of us.
So we've got about a minute and a half left now. So what is the key message that you would like anyone who's thinking about voting for you to know?
I'm not a politician. I am a mum and a business owner, and you know what? I don't have anything more to give than any other candidate going, but I'm open, I'm honest, and I've always got a brew in my hand at the quick teapot. So, I'm just me, and I make decisions, and I like to get things done, but they have to be done right.
That was Abby Quirk, who's standing for election in Arbory, Castletown and Malew. Also standing in the constituency are Jew and Christian, Steve Crowther, Mark Firth, Kirrie Jenkins, Jason Moorhouse and Geoff Sutcliffe. You can listen back to this interview, along with all the others recorded as part of this series, shortly after broadcast from your usual podcast provider. And don't forget, for everything you need to know about the general election, just head to our dedicated website, which you can find at manxradio.com.